reported they say the case against Allen isn't strong enough to hold him without bond. He remains at a state prison for security reasons after his arrest in October. He's charged with murder in the killings of Abigail Williams and Libby German 6 years ago. Experts looked at the microscopic marks on an unfired bullet found near the girls' bodies. They say those marks show the bullet was cycled through Allen's handgun. Police found that gun during a search of his home shortly before his arrest. But his defense attorneys are skeptical of that, quote, magic bullet. They say in a statement, ballistics are anything but a science and the discipline is under attack in courtrooms nationwide.
Jones and Johnson, and this is Kitchen Table Research, where we do the research so you don't have to. Today we are doing another short chatters episode, as we're going to call them, and we have a very special guest with us. His name is Kurt, and he is from the podcast The Strange Sessions. So I've been listening to you guys for quite some time now, years, and I really enjoy your podcast. You and your co-host Krista have such a natural, organic, kind of like you are sitting around a table, just having a conversation between yourselves. And I really enjoy not only your podcast, but you guys have a great fan base and you guys really love your fans a lot. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about the Strange Sessions.
Definitely. But thank you so much for having me on here. I'm excited about this.
Yay, we are too.
The Strange Sessions started, I think, right back in 2016. And, we talk all the time on the show about how we literally thought it was just going to be a dozen friends and family members listening. And Krista and I are both members of a ghost hunting group. So we started this podcast about the paranormal, about weird things called The Strange Sessions. And, we cover a lot of haunted houses, Bigfoot, UFOs, and a lot of weird stuff too. Like anybody that's listened to it knows that I'm big with theories about reality, about parallel universes, about whether or not we're living in a computer simulation, that kind of stuff.
You guys do a lot on the Mandela effect, which I love, and I love your 411 cases.
The missing 411 cases is how most people find us, and that's when people go disappearing in national parks in mysterious ways. And that, Krista and I have always been fascinated by that, and that's kind of how a lot of people find us. But it's weird. It's weird to us that so many people listen because we kind of didn't expect that. And like you said, we have such an amazing fan base. We've had very little drama, and everybody in there is so supportive. And it amazes us. And, it's every episode when we see like the people that download it, how many people download it, we're just floored that anybody listens to us babble about stuff.
Well, your voices are so soothing to me. So I'll be up at like 4 a.m. sometimes with, I have a 2-year-old, but when we were up and down all night, I love listening to you guys at night because, like I said, your voices are so soothing. And so my son has been listening to you guys in the belly. So it's amazing that you're here with us today. And honestly, this is very special to me. I feel like I know you guys, but like I said, I'll be listening in the middle of the night and I see Krista's online because I know you guys both wake up very early for work.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'll text Krista and be like, oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. And just the fact that she gets back to me and responds. And like I said, you guys have such a great fan base. So
yeah, it amazes us when people are like surprised that we actually text them back. Like we have people that we just have email them back instead of us because we're so busy. And I'm sitting on my couch with a bag of Cheetos watching TV half the time. I think that they think our lives are a little more exciting than they actually are.
Well, we hope that's how our fan base turns out to be. We really love any of our listeners, and we want everybody to be respectful because we do dive into some pretty tragic true crime in cases where there is a lot of trauma and sadness like I said yesterday, we covered the Moscow murders, and it's just a travesty. And so we want to keep our fan base as healthy as possible. There should only be respect for the victims of these crimes, and we feel very strongly that we want to maintain a level of respect for the victims that we do talk about. It's important to us as well. So, anywho, today we are going to be talking about the Delphi case, which I'm sure a lot of you have been following. Again, it's kind of like the Moscow murders. It's been up in the news, especially recently. And Johnson is going to lead us through this episode. Per usual, we have all of our pictures across social media now. You can find us in the story section on our Instagram page. You can find us Kitchen Table Research Podcast on Facebook. And remember that Johnson did such a great job at putting together our website. You definitely have to go check it out. That's where all things KTR can be found. We also have a little thing going on that if you go like, subscribe, rate, review, send us an email and let us know that you did that, and I will send you a gift from the studio. I have quite a collection of spooky things and little pieces of art and things I've gotten from haunted hotels and tarot cards, but really fun stuff. So if you go rate and review, hit us up on our email, kitchen.table.research@gmail.com, and give us your address, and I will send something spooky your way. Johnson's going to go ahead and start us off in this case.
I'd like to thank her again. This is for taking the risk on this new startup, and this is also my first lead on an episode. Our last episode was on the Idaho 4, and we decided to follow up with Delphi again because they have very recent updates, and there are also some similarities between the cases that sort of link them. Both cases, they are incredibly violent crimes that occur in small towns where you just don't expect this sort of thing to happen. They both involve young women and girls who are seemingly attacked at random. In both cases, investigators have really kept a close lid on the investigation and don't disclose a ton of information to the public, which of course is a great thing, despite how frustrating it might be for junkies like us. There were also a few Reddit users who observed that both of these crimes happened on the 13th day of the month. And I know Sully also had other crimes that we've done that also happened on the 13th.
Yeah, one of the cases we covered, the Betty Gore case, Betty Gore was killed on Friday the 13th. And then the case that we're currently working on, Darlie Routier, that crime happened on June 6th, 1996. So 666 kind of lines up there. Does that mean anything? I mean, I don't know.
I'm sure most of you have hopefully heard about this case. It has been done to such a wonderful level of minutia and research just about everywhere. It's a great thing. I have heard the victims' families talk for the past 3 years, and they have really been pushing for this case to be publicized. So that information is out there for anyone to hear. So today we're really going to focus on updates and our theories and things like that. So I'll give you a quick once over of the case.
Didn't you meet some of the Delphi family members at CrimeCon?
I've not gone up and talked to them, but I have been near them for the past 3 years when I've gone. And I don't know what to say to them. What can I say other than I'm so sorry, and they just look so sad every year. And they are doing so much to keep this case alive and get it solved, which hopefully it has been, and keep my distance and respect their privacy. But yeah, they're heroes, really. But seeing them has really made this case personal to me.
Sure.
Because there's not a lot of occasions you have to potentially meet the victim's family. So just to give a brief overview of the crime, there were 2 girls, Abby and Libby, and they were tweens, and they were on the Monon High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana one afternoon, taking Snapchats, pictures of each other, just hanging out, having fun. And then they record a video of a man approaching them. And the next day they are found dead together. So I'm going to be leading this case with information. Sully has some, and I believe Kurt as well has some gun knowledge that can bring and help us kind of figure out the minutia of that, because I know nothing about guns. I can shoot them, that's about it. Kurt also has a lot of experience with geocaching. It all goes back to Peru. This is what an investigator in Abby and Libby's murders has said years ago, and it has stuck with me since I first learned about this case in 2017. And it is eerily accurate in ways I think he never imagined. It really all starts and ends in Peru, Indiana, which is a town very close to Delphi. So we're going to talk about one of the original suspects in the case, which is Keegan Kline. He is a known pedophile. He had a Snapchat alias called Anthony Shots. He did have a few others, but he was in contact with Libby under this alias, and he posed as a minor, and he set up a meeting with her at the Monon High Bridge for the day that the crime occurs. Kline denies having set this up, but police say that he did, so I'm going to err on the side of police. He was supposed to go to trial this month for possession of child pornography, child exploitation, which is related to the Snapchat stuff he did, and obstruction of justice. His trial was delayed because his lawyer said that he is in negotiations with the police on another case. So he was trying to get his charges reduced in this case by giving police information about the Delphi case, we think. We know he's in negotiations to have charges reduced, and I'll go on to say why we think it's related to Delphi. So in August of 2022, which it was very shortly after Kline delayed his trial to talk to police, the police do a search of Kline's grandparents' fire pit and of the Wabash River, which is the river that runs right next to the Monon High Bridge. So they have not officially come out and said that these searches were related to the Abby and Libby case. 2 months later, on October 28th, Richard Allen is arrested. So that's a lot of information I just tossed out. Do we have any comments or questions?
Yeah, so originally you're talking about a man named Kline, and so then you skip to a man named Allen. Can you just explain that connection to us once again?
Yeah, so Keegan Kline was one of the original suspects when the case first happened. And Richard Allen, we had never heard of him until he's arrested October 28th. Mm-hmm. So we're assuming that Kline's information led to Allen's arrest.
And so that's been placed under a gag order. So that's why we don't have a lot of information there.
Correct. And also the police have had a history in this case of keeping information close to the vest. Right. So that's to be expected.
My other question is, I wonder why they searched the fire pit, because we know most about this case is that the girls were shot. I know that they haven't come out with their official cause of death yet, but we know that there was a gun involved. So I'm wondering, why? Do you have any info about why they would have searched the fireplace?
So, like I said, police have not been forthcoming about that information. We don't know why they searched the fire pit. We only know that they did. And I also don't know why his grandparents' fire pit specifically was involved. We don't know what evidence they might have been looking for. And like you said, we don't know if the girls were shot. We don't know their cause of death.
And their clothing was found, correct?
Yeah, it was found in a creek not far away from the girls. We don't know the condition of them.
So we don't know what was in that search warrant for the fireplace for the grandparents' house, and we don't know exactly what Kline said about Allen.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions there?
Well, I didn't say this earlier, but I'm from Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and our true crime infamy is the Stephen Avery case.
Yes.
Yes.
And as soon as I heard stuff about Fire Pit, because that was a huge part of the Stephen Avery stuff. And I wonder too what could have, the only thing I could think of was that a weapon, like one of the weapons or something had to be in there, because it makes no sense what else would be in there. But it's just, as soon as I hear Fire Pit, it just, raises up all these alarms for me because of the Stephen Avery stuff here in case. And with our podcast, so many people want us to talk about that, but we won't, because I'm friends with some of the Averys. I'm friends with some of the Dass.
Really?
Yeah, I'm friends with Avery's daughter. I worked with her. I'm friends with some of the Dassies. I'm friends with the sheriff that put Avery away the first time. So that's one of those things that it's way too close to home for me to talk about. But as soon as I hear Fire Pit, I'm like, oh boy. But that was my guess, is that they were looking for a weapon or maybe correspondence between the two, but I don't think there would have been paper, like hard copies of correspondence. I think anything would have been done electronically. Digital. So I don't know. That's just, it's a weird thing to me. The Fire Pit's a weird thing.
I think so too. And I'm like, even if you throw a gun in a fire pit, that gun's not going to burn.
Yeah.
And again, they searched this fire pit 5 years after the murders. I don't know what could have possibly been left.
Do we know, was anything taken from the girls? I mean, was anything taken from the crime scene that we know of?
So we'll get into that in the next paragraph.
Because maybe that's what was getting destroyed in a fire pit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Prosecutors have come out publicly and stated, this is before the gag order was in place, that they think there was at least one other person involved in Abby and Libby's murder. So the only other two main suspects that we know about besides Alan are Keegan Kline and Ron Logan. Logan owns the property that the girls were found on, and his house is 1,400 feet from where their bodies were found. The month after the murders, in March of 2017, the police have a search warrant that they execute for his home, his outbuildings, his vehicles, everything, his computers, all of it. And in that affidavit, they were searching for a souvenir taken from the girls and fibers and hairs that were also found on them. So assuming that a gun was the murder weapon, it's interesting how fibers and hairs would be found on them. Now, we know the girls' bodies were staged, so it must have happened when he was moving them. But also, I don't know if any of you guys have any information on this. Do we know if they could have gotten contact DNA back in 2017?
I don't know.
Like, do you mean like a touch DNA?
Yes.
I think the capability would have been there, but again, the girls were out in the elements, that night, and so I wonder if some of that DNA was destroyed in the process. What was the weather like? Do we know? Didn't it rain?
Don't quote me on this, but I believe it rained the night they were searching for them.
Yeah, because I think they had to call off the search due to weather.
Yeah. Listeners, if we're wrong, please send us an email. That's what you're for. Ron Logan's build matches the man on the Snapchat video that the girls took. His voice is consistent with the voice of the man on the video, and he has a history of violence against women. Several women in his life had come forward to the police and said that they were afraid of him and he had violent conduct and he hated women. So we don't know any particulars. Ron Logan also lied about his alibi for the day and time of the murders. He asked his relative to say that he had driven him to a fish store, but the relative came back the next day and told the police, hey, he asked me to lie to you.
What's a fish store? Like an aquarium or like to get fishing supplies?
That's a good question. I only read fish store.
Fish, okay.
Or to get smoked fish. I mean, we have a lot of fish stores here where you go to buy smoked fish and salmon and stuff like that.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, so
something with fish was a lie. Something was fishy about his story.
I love it.
His cell phone also pinged the tower right near the girls at the time of their murder. Now, keep in mind that his home is only 1,400 feet away. So I while it's suspicious for sure, I would not put, I wouldn't convict this man based off of that evidence alone. As if you guys are familiar with the Adnan Syed case, he was convicted of murdering his girlfriend, Heyman Lee, mostly based off of cell phone tower evidence, which was later found to be faulty. Now, we know that this is back in the 90s, and presumably that data is more accurate today or in 2017. It's so close to his house. I don't understand how you could possibly prove that he was in that specific area. And then Ron Logan died in 2022 at the age of 84, and he was never arrested in connection to this case. The search warrant did not find anything.
So although it's his land and his cell phone pinged off of it, they really
and he
don't.
lied his alibi.
And he lied about his alibi. They don't really have anything else to connect him directly to the girls.
How old was he at the time of the murder? I mean,
80?
He would have been 79, I think.
I just have a hard time believing somebody. I mean, I'm 52 and I don't have the energy to do anything like that. I can't imagine.
I'm 26. I don't have that energy.
Okay, so we've gone from Klein to Allen to Logan. And I think from here on out, we can kind of cross Logan off the list. The age, the fact that it is his land. I mean, he has the right to be there. Like you said, there's some fishy things. Maybe he allowed people to come on his property to do nefarious things. But in my opinion, I'm going to rule him out as the murderer.
Yes, I think if the police had found anything, he would have been arrested.
It could have just been as simple as he was at home, just home doing nothing, and he was worried that would make him look guilty that he didn't have an alibi. So maybe he asked somebody to lie so it seemed like he did have one.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I mean, I am alone 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
If I was accused, I would be SOL.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not unheard of for innocent people to come up with an alibi just for the reasons you guys just stated. So I think we answered a lot of the questions that we were going to discuss. But one thing I do want to touch on is Serial, which was the podcast about the Adnan Syed case, is really set the precedent for podcasting. It was the first podcast I ever listened to, and I just want to give them a shout out. It was such a great podcast that it opened a whole world that I didn't even know was out there. So, and then now the fact that they have enough attention has been brought to that case for Adnan to have been cleared and been released is, I think that's amazing. And so I just want to give kudos to, I can't remember the lady's name that was the journalist for the Adnan case, but she did an excellent job. So if you haven't listened to Serial, you guys, as listeners, you guys need to go check out that case. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, it was also the first podcast that I ever listened to, and it really, I'm going to college for criminology now, and that podcast is the reason. That's the reason I'm here.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm really here.
Yeah, and I think our goal from that podcast really made us realize we can help people be exonerated, and we can help make sure that victims are remembered the way that they should be as people.
And along those lines, the Your Own Backyard podcast with the Kristen Smart case. I don't know if you guys know anything about that. I've listened to that podcast, I think, almost since the start, and it was amazing to see a podcast about a true crime culminate with the trial where the podcaster was in the trial. So if you've never listened to the Kristen Smart, I can't remember his name, but I have nothing but the utmost respect for him taking this on and making a change.
Daily Mail, they have a lawsuit going against them, but it does bring up some theories that I think are worth discussing and maybe dismissing. So one of the first claims from the Daily Mail is that Klein, remember he's the pedophile, Allen, which has been arrested for Delphi case, and Logan, who is the property owner, were all connected in a kidnapping, pedophile, sex ring. So Allen and Klein supposedly knew each other, and they would bring the girls to Logan's property to do whatever. So do you guys think with the Wabash River search after they questioned Klein and Allen's arrest shortly thereafter, do you think that proves that there's a connection between them? Or do you think that's just where the Daily Mail got the idea to make up this connection?
I think the Daily Mail is such a joke that, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Although I can also say that sometimes rumors that you think, oh, there's no way, turn out to be there's some truth to them. So I'm going to sit on the fence about that.
Me too.
I read the Daily Mail about the Moscow murders, and nothing, and they put their article out like 2 weeks after the murders. So since then, it's all been disproven. So they were not correct at all on that.
I mean, sometimes there is truth in rumors, but again, I think like we've all stated, you just have to take it with a grain of salt.
And particularly while they're investigating and they're not telling us much.
Right.
So
when we were kind of doing our read through earlier, one of the things that I thought about though is it's kind of like when you're a pedophile, it takes one to know one. It seems like they are able to find each other. We hear a lot about sex rings and, pedophiles working together or having correspondence, or I think that there's a lot more under the surface than we want to even think about, which is very sad. And I had just done a quick Google, and 800,000 children under the age of 18 go missing per year. So that means that 2,000 kids go missing a day. So we know
is that worldwide?
That's in America. That's just in the U.S.
Whoa.
And so we know, I couldn't find the stats on recovery. Like, we know a lot of children go missing and it ends up being another parent. The child is found. And so I can't really get a statistic on how many of those kids are found, either alive or dead. But that number is staggering.
Yeah, that really is. I mean, in my work, I've had several, I wouldn't say several, one or two parents that have been involved in either their child's been kidnapped or they subsequently have been found to be kidnapped. And that community health arena that was up in Colorado, that is such an interesting arena to work in because it's not private medicine. We had feral children that came down out of the mountains that were discovered. And I'm like, I don't think my education really prepared me for some of it.
It sounds insane that there would be this conspiracy sex ring in this tiny town, but it also does happen more than we like to think.
Yeah, it does happen. And when I was researching this, I came across a lot of theories that it was at his house, that they did bring the girls to his house and they got away and they were chasing them. And that's why they were killed where they were. But then you start to think, why didn't they just leave the bodies there? Why didn't they take the bodies with them? So
Right.
if you start to analyze some of the stuff, but like you said, I think, we did our episode where we talked about Elsa Gate, which is the creepy YouTube sexualized,
Kid
really
stuff.
poorly made cartoons for kids. And then when you go look at some of the comments underneath some of them, it's disturbing. It's bad. And that's one way these people can find each other. And God knows what goes on the dark web with, I've heard nothing but stories about forums on there where people get together, and it's frightening. And I work in a middle school. I work with sixth graders. And I have had quite a number of them tell me that they walk to school, and there's been times that somebody in a car slows down, looks at them, goes around the block, and does the same thing again. And I wish I could say it was just one or two, but it's a lot more than that.
And would you consider your community fairly safe, Kurt? I mean,
yeah, I would. So, I mean, it happens. It does happen.
All right. Well, let's lighten things up with a dead cat.
Okay.
So
let's talk about a dead cat.
So, all right, this is still from the Daily Mail. So again, keep your grain of salt next to you. So a neighbor sees police digging in the backyard of Richard Allen's parents' house. And The Daily Mail claims that the police were digging up the parents' deceased cat. So the cat hair, again, according to the Daily Mail, was said to be a match to one of the hairs found on the girls' bodies. Now, in my mind, A, we know that hair matching is not an exact science. It can be similar or not similar. That's it. And B, this cat has been buried for 5 years. I mean, do you guys think that's evidentiary value at all?
No,
No.
no.
No, I think that the Daily Mail ran with some piece of information. But how close was Alan's house to the Logan property? Do we know?
I know that his house was fairly close to the Freedom Trail area. And again, Logan's house was 1,400 feet from where the girls' bodies were. So, I mean, again, it's a small town. They're all pretty close to each other.
Sure. But we haven't seen any affidavits or any search warrants for the dead cat stuff?
No.
No. Okay. So,
but again, police keep information close to the vest.
Right.
Who knows? This cat might be the hero of the story.
1,400 feet. Well, first of all, you have to assume that Delphi's a very small town. 1,400 feet is only a quarter of a mile. I mean, it's not like it's 10 miles down the road, you know? So my understanding was that Logan's house sat on the upper banks of the Wabash. And when they found the girls, it was closer down to the river. Am I right or wrong?
I think you are correct.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
Do you think that he could see that particular location from his house?
I mean,
that's a creepy thought. Area. That's a creepy thought, but yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, it's still a heavily wooded area. The girls are unfortunately very small, so.
Well, I just mean not that like he can physically see them, but kind of as a, almost as a memento that he can walk out his backyard and think, yeah.
Oh, one of the theories as to why the girls were out at the Monenhigh Bridge that day is that they were geocaching. They have done it before, and Kurt, our first guest ever, is a geocaching expert. So, Kurt, will you tell us a little bit about it and what you found in connection to this case?
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I do it quite a bit. Do you guys want to know what geocaching is? Do you want me to describe what it is?
To us,
yeah.
So geocaching is basically a treasure hunt where other geocachers go out somewhere in the world. It could be a park, it could be a woods, it could be a cemetery, and they hide a container somewhere in that area, and they put the coordinates online, and other geocachers go to look for it. The containers can be as small as your pinky nail, or it can be as big as a literal shed in the woods, which we have found. So if it's a relatively bigger size container, there's usually toys or trinkets inside of it. You can take something out and replace it with something, but every geocache has a piece of paper or a little book inside of it. That's the log book that you sign with your team's name to say, I found this. And then you go online and you log it on the geocaching website, and then you go on to the next one. That's basically what it is.
Does one lead to the next, or are they all individual?
They're all there's some called multi-caches where one cache will have the coordinates to the next one, and that one will have the coordinates to the next one.
Okay.
But for the most part, they're all just like individual.
Okay.
And I've been doing this since 2006. My team, Turkey Time, we have, I think, a little over 2,500 finds.
Wow.
So we've done, and there's people out there with 20,000, 30,000. I had no idea that it had anything to do with geocaching until you told me. And I was like, what? And I went on, I did a Google search, and I'm like, wow, because I didn't know that geocaching was kind of tied in with this. So I spent like the last week looking up stuff online on Reddit. And there's just a lot of misconceptions with people about what geocaching is and what it can do. Like
I have a question.
Yes.
Kurt, are they latitude and longitude?
Yes, it's latitude and longitude.
Okay. So they give you the general area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and it's sometimes it'll be just sitting there by a tree. There's other times that they're really difficult. There's some that. There was the one where we got to this area, and it was kind of like a clearing in the woods, and we couldn't find it. We were getting more and more mad that we couldn't find it. And I kind of went off a little bit by another tree, and I'm looking at this tree and I'm thinking I see what looks like a garter snake, and then I realize it's a rope. So I untie it from the tree, and that lowers the geocache down from the tree above the clearing. So they can be very difficult or they can be very easy. But there's some that you actually have to solve puzzles for that are a lot of Sudoku puzzles. It is like Aaron. Like I originally did this when my ex-girlfriend and I stumbled across a Tupperware container by the river here in Manitowoc, and I had heard what geocaching is, so her and I did it. And then after we broke up, she moved away, and then I kind of went out by myself. But I'm like, oh, this isn't fun by yourself.
Right.
So I told one of my best friends, Aaron, about it. He looked at me. He said, that sounds like the dumbest thing ever. But he said, call me when you go. I want to see what it's like. And he was just hooked. The next day, he's like, let's go. And every day he wanted to go. So it's amazingly fun. And it brings you to so many places. Like, there's a joke T-shirt that says, I'm a geocacher. Don't piss me off because I know where to hide the body. Which in retrospect with this case isn't really appropriate.
Yeah.
But it does. It brought me places in Manitowoc, like parks I never knew were there. We've been deep out in the woods finding a bunch of them. But the thing is, a lot of the people seem to think you can use it as a lure to lure somebody out. And you really can't. You really kind of can't, because there's no way to know when somebody's coming. And if you're doing it on your phone, you'll maybe find the geocache and then log it as you're walking away, and it'll take a minute or two for it to show up online. A lot of times I don't even log the ones we find until Aaron and I are driving away in the car, and I go on my phone and I say, found it, thank you for the cache. So there's really kind of the only possible way to lure anybody geocaching, you don't get a prize for it or anything, but there's something called FTF, where you're the first one to find the cache, and it's kind of like a badge of honor to be the first one to find the cache. So conceivably, a killer could put one out in the hopes that people would come there as soon as possible. But if you're of the mindset that you're going to do these kind of crimes, I feel like you're going to want to have control of the situation and not all these random variables. But I looked this up. I want to just give a little bit of like what it's like. So there is one in Delphi that's called High Bridge. It's called High Bridge, and it's on the trail. It's by where they were killed. So I went back and looked at all the cache logs for that. I looked at everything for that. So here's a little bit of what it's like. Somebody found the geocache on July 1st, 2016. And then July 2nd, 2016, one day later, is when Kelsey found it. And Kelsey, I believe, is Libby's sister.
Yeah.
Correct. I think that might be the same day, because I looked at all the geocaches that Kelsey found, and there's a couple that she logged that she was with Libby the day she found them. But she found it July 2nd, 2016. Somebody else found it July 4th, 2016, 2 days later. And then it wasn't found and logged again until November 29th of 2016. So you're talking 4 months without anybody being there to find the geocache. And then it was found a month later on the 26th of December. Yes.
Well, how big is the geocaching community? I feel like if it's a small group of people, it would be expected that it would take a long time for someone else to find it.
Or is it over the winter months where people might not be caching?
Yeah, because I think since Aaron and I have started doing this, I think we have found one geocache in February. Because February in Wisconsin, you don't want to be out geocaching, and I'm guessing that's kind of the same down by where they are.
Right.
The geocaching community is really big, but in a small town like Delphi, you're not going to have a lot of people come to town to get geocaches there because it's such a small, out of the way place. Yeah, it's a pretty big community, but it's all kind of relative on the size of the area and how accessible it is. Because this is kind of off on the trails and stuff. And if you're not from that area and you're driving through, you're probably not going to want to spend hours going around this trail trying to find these. Yes.
So if the cache site was it on Logan's property?
No, you can't put it on private property.
Okay, that was my question.
It was on the High Bridge. There were a couple other ones around the trail area, but most of those are gone now. But like I said, it was months. It went months between people finding the cash, and then somebody found it on February 14th, 2017, which is I think the day after.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
I don't know if it was the same person, but this person that the same day wrote, quote, due to the ongoing police investigation of the two local girls that were visiting near this location when they disappeared, I would suggest avoiding this cache site for the time being, and it might be wise for the cache owner to disable the cache as well. And that same day, the geocache owner wrote, quote, going to disable this cache until the police investigation clears up. Thanks for the heads up.
Oh
So,
my God.
yeah, so
I wonder if police ever interviewed that person.
I'm guessing so. There was a lot of talk that why did these caches disappear? I mean, a lot of the people that put these geocaches out disabled the cache, one, because the police were around, and two, out of respect for the girls.
Sure.
Yeah.
It turns out that the person that put the geocache out, and this guy puts them out all around that area. So it's not like he was being sketchy, because anywhere in the Delphi area, this is like the main geocache guy that puts all these out.
Okay.
So then on the 22nd, April 22nd, he wrote, it's time to bring this back. So then he put the cache back out. And even I kind of thought, with that area being infamous, I thought more people would have came there, but they really kind of didn't. There were some more finds. It was kind of spotty, 1 or 2 days between, sometimes a month between, sometimes 3 months between. And then finally on September 19th, this isn't, it was actually archived for good on September 20th, 2020. The cache owner wrote, hi all, after all the did not finds, it's clear that this cache needs maintenance. After the tragedy in the area, I've decided not to replace it, but just to archive it instead. Hopefully somebody else can do something better with this area. So the cache is no longer there. But this made me think, like this one kind of hit me. The day before that, on September 19th, 2020, a geocacher wrote, quote, came to Delphi because I've always wanted to see the bridge, and I heard they were discussing renovations. I wanted to see it prior to any changes. So I had planned to come out here and hike alone the day the unfortunate event happened to the two young girls, but I got called into work, so my hike was canceled and I was angry. Then when I heard the news, I was glad I went to work, but I also wonder if I had been there, would they have been okay? I just don't know.
Oh
Like,
gosh,
Oh my
that
God.
sent chills
that
down my
sucks.
spine.
That sucks to be that, to always wonder. Like, theoretically, she could have been walking across the bridge when this happened, and it maybe would never have happened if this geocacher would have been there that day. So that one just like really hit me. That one hit me hard, I guess.
Yeah.
But you can see how it's not a lure. It's not something that's going to lure people there. So I just have a hard time thinking there's any sort of connection with geocaches. I just don't see that. The only ways I could see geocaching having anything to do with it is if maybe Libby was taking Abby out there to just show her the geocache and say, hey, I know where there's a geocache. Or maybe the bridge guy was going
I
out
was
to
gonna
find
say,
it.
what about the guy that sent them the Snapchat?
Yeah, I mean,
Fine.
Yeah.
Police
guess
have
it's-
not said anything about geocaching having anything to do with the meetup.
Yeah.
I think that they would have checked it out and then just realized that there's really nothing,
Okay.
There.
unless somebody was somehow conversing with them online and told them to go there,
Right.
something geocaching related. That's the only thing I can think of. But so many people are making a big deal about the cache being not there anymore. It's because the person, I think, disabled all these
Yeah.
because of what happened. And the thing with geocaching is, just because the cache is gone and archived and it's not there anymore, there's still all the records. Like I was able to go back. That one was disabled 2-3 years ago, and I was able to look at the entire list of people that found that geocache. So it's just not a really good way if you're going to go about doing something like this. That is not a good way, because there's a paper trail and it's too random. It's just it's not gonna work. So I just
Okay.
don't buy it.
I thought I heard it was also a premium cache, so only people that were paid subscribers would know where that one was.
Well, the thing is, all the caches this guy put out, including this high bridge one I said, they weren't premium caches, I believe. I
Okay.
tried to find out if they were, and they weren't. But then this all ties into this other suspect, this professor. There's a professor somewhere that was like a huge online suspect because he had put out some geocaches that were premium, and I believe those were ones that Kelsey found. But
Okay.
Kelsey, from everything I read, Kelsey asked Libby not to go geocaching without her because that was kind of their thing.
Yeah,
And
I heard Kelsey say that too.
yeah, and I don't think Libby or Abby would have had an account, a geocaching account. So I don't think they were going out there that day to look for the geocache. I think they were going out there because they had a day off of school.
Yeah, and that was kind of like a hangout.
A lot of misconception about it being a snow day, but it wasn't actually a snow day. It wasn't that the day was that school was canceled that day because of the snow. It was because they had an allotment of snow days to use up. So even though that wasn't a bad weather day, they had the day off. Because if you look in the picture, there's like really no snow on the ground. It's you know, it's not. So a lot of people are thinking that the killer wouldn't have known they were going to have that day off, but they very well could have, because it was planned in advance that that was going to be a snow day.
Yeah, growing up in Boston, I remember one winter was so terrible. We had like the last month off from school because of all these snow days we had accumulated. And those schedules are posted on the news and any publicly accessed sites like a week in advance. So, I mean, it could have been a crime of opportunity. It could not have been. We just don't know.
But I don't know if you're going to go into him or not, but this professor, the archaeology professor, like,
no, tell us about him.
I didn't really dive into him too much, but there was just like this online witch hunt for this guy. It was weird that one of the geocaches I looked at, I believe Kelsey logged it as a find the day after he did. In Manitowoc, I can go find a geocache and I'm going to recognize 99% of the names on the geocache because I see them all the time. So there's nothing about that. But people were turning it into this thing saying that the professor killed her because she, in one of her logs for the geocache, she said it was too easy to find it. Just like ridiculous, like ridiculous. I told that to Aaron, the one that I geocache with, and he's like, "Oh my God!" So just ridiculous stuff. But on the other hand, it is something that I'm hoping they at least looked into because
like
it is a possible angle, but it's just not very likely. It's just not.
Well,
also on that line, Sully had brought up earlier the tattoo suspect. Sully, do you want to talk about him?
Well, I did, a little digging, and it seems like he had gotten that tattoo. We'll post it on our social media just so you guys can see it. But he had gotten that tattoo, and I believe he was in prison. And so he came out of prison with it. His family doesn't even really know because he's kind of all tattooed up. But the tattoo is a portrait of a young girl with what people thought was tears coming out of her eyes. He has been charged. He's currently in prison. His name is James Brian Chadwell. They got a search warrant for him. He lives in like Lafayette, Indiana, so I'm not quite sure how far away that is, but I mean, it's in the same state, so he seems like a good suspect. And when they executed the search warrant, they found a locked door that went down to a basement where he was holding young women, and one of his victims he strangled so hard that blood came out of her eyes, and so that is what the tattoo portrays. And
oh my God,
yeah, that's some really gruesome, sick stuff. Kelsey German, I think we talked about her, Libby's sister. She posted on her Twitter that although this guy was one of the bad guys, in this kind of pedophile world, that it wasn't their guy. He's been ruled out. I believe he was in prison when the murders occurred, but because of the tattoo, it led kind of a manhunt, and they were able to put him away for pedophilia. So again, we have this underlying theme that there could be a ring in this area.
It's just so weird to think of a small town like Delphi having that kind of undercurrent, but it happens. even like, with the geocaching stuff, what was more disturbing to me that I didn't even think about was a lot of people, when they were talking about the geocaching stuff, was talking about Pokemon Go, the phone game, because people were saying it there. You could go out in the woods and you could put whatever it was in Pokemon Go, the gym or whatever, and you could put, so you could use that more to lure kids. But you also don't see a lot of 12, 13-year-olds going out geocaching by themselves. It's mostly a family thing.
Yeah.
But it can be sketchy. I mean, we always, like Aaron and I talked about all the times that we were in a park, like on the border of a park where there's houses right there. And people see me duck under a pine tree with his 11-year-old daughter. So it's weird. There was one time that we were doing it here in town and the cops came because a neighbor for some reason thought that it had something to do with drugs, that we were going there to leave drugs and people would leave money there and we'd come to pick up the money and leave the drugs there. So geocaching is kind of sketchy in some ways when you think about it, but
so
it's
a safety tip for our listeners: do not geocache alone. Always take an adult with you.
Back when I was doing it by myself, there was one rainy, drizzly day where I wanted to get this one in Two Rivers, which is the next town over, and it was in a children's park up on top of the slide. So I'm out there in the rain and I'm standing up here on top of this slide in a children's park, just like staring at it. And then all of a sudden I hear something and I look up and there's a cop in the parking lot just watching me. So he had to wonder what the hell I was doing, so.
I'm just an adult man on a treasure hunt. Don't worry.
In the rain. I'm just sitting up here in the slide in the rain. It can have its weird moments as a lure for somebody. No, I totally believe that they were out geocaching, but that day I don't believe they were out geocaching. I know her and Kelsey did it other times, but that day, no. I believe they were just going out to take pictures.
It is a very interesting angle, though, that I don't think a lot of people have talked about.
And I believe Kelsey specifically forbid Libby to go on that bridge, near that bridge.
She said she was scared of it, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yes. She wouldn't cross it by herself.
I didn't look into this case a lot because I have a hard time with true crime sometimes, especially with kids, because I work with kids. But I assumed the bridge had railings to hold and stuff. And when I saw that video of it, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't want to. I'm scared of heights.
Even as a kid.
There's no way I'd go across that.
No. So that's kind of what I got for geocaching. I understand that it could be some kind of potential lead and it should have been investigated, but I'm 99.9% sure it had nothing to do with what happened.
One of the girls, I don't remember which one, and I apologize. It's been years since I had to take a big break from this case after I first learned about it because it haunted me so much. But she refused to cross that bridge by herself, and she was so scared of it. I mean, not only were there no railings, it's high off the ground. I mean, there were boards missing. Right. Some of them were, there's a reason why they were going to renovate it.
In Lubbock, too, that kids hang out at, and it's called Hell's Gate because it's just scary. And then once you cross the bridge, it leads you to the backside of a cemetery. So again, a lot of kids, high schoolers, college kids kind of hang out there.
Yeah. The only other thing that what was interesting to me about my research is that it seems like a lot of kids hang out around this area there by the trails. Kelsey said that I think she said there were 10 to 20 kids visible at the trail that day when she dropped Libby and Abby off. So it was kind of a popular hangout spot, which makes this guy doing what he did even more. It's just
ballsy.
A popular place. Yeah, very ballsy. I'm one of those people, I don't want to know what really happened. I don't want to know what the crime scene looked like. I've heard enough that disturb me. I don't want to know what happened to them. I just would like to know if this was a spur of the moment decision on his part or if this was something planned.
Premeditated.
If it was specifically towards
those two girls.
From what I read, it seems like Libby got it was almost after Libby. It was very Libby oriented what he did. I just would like to know the rest. Yeah, the rest of it is, I'm not one of those people that want to know all the grisly details.
And do you remember if it was Libby or Abby that was scared of the bridge?
I don't remember.
I don't either.
But I know Libby was the one who was in contact with Keaton Klein and had made plans to meet at that bridge that day.
What Keaton did, though, I think happens more than people realize. I know people that, I have some, not my students, but younger friends of mine that are 16, 17, 18. know that I am really good at finding out stuff about somebody online. And they'll be like, Kurt, I'm chatting with this guy, and then send me his picture, and then I'll do reverse image searches and stuff. And I'm like, no, this is not who you think it is. And it happens. The catfish. Yeah, but when you get into like the 16 and 17, when you get into them being underage, and that's when it gets, but it happens more than I think people realize.
It's just so funny because Sully and I were trying to reverse image search someone. And it came back with the result of a brown bag.
Nice.
Which we thought was so funny.
Because this person is basically a brown bag.
Every February, I do a 50-hour trivia hunt or a trivia contest with my friends. It's run through Minneapolis, through the St. Paul College or the St. Cloud University. And part of it is we get like 30 images that are almost impossible to find out what they are. So I have gotten really, really good at reverse image searches and delve more into like doing the true crime investigating stuff, because I'm really good at finding stuff online. It's just sometimes the darkness gets to be too much of that stuff.
It is.
I have a hard time.
It's a good thing.
I have a strong gut. I mean, I've worked in the funeral home and picked up bodies in my career. Some of them really get to you. Like I remember one case where, and you were kind of saying something about this earlier, that it's so close together that it's just creepy. But one body I picked up, unfortunately, he was in a drinking and driving accident on the highway here, and his Whataburger was still warm. And it's just like thinking about like, he just got food, and he was not the one that was drinking and driving. Somebody had fallen asleep at the wheel on the other side of the road. And, like I said, I have a pretty strong gut. I've unfortunately picked up suicide victims, hangings, shootings, you name it. Investigating the Darlie Routier case, and then Kenneth McDuff. I had nightmares about him when we did that episode. That one really creeped me out to my core.
I just remember driving around listening to was it the yogurt shop murders?
Yes, that one's very.
And I'm driving around and I'm like literally saying "oof" out loud when I hear some of that stuff that you're talking about. I mean, it just I go on true crime
kind of get
binges.
into the gritty details because it's not out of disrespect for our victims, but it is to show what the human mind is capable of. And we try to do it in a very respectable way. Our number one goal here is to be respectful of our victims, but
I mean,
their story deserves to be told,
Yeah.
So, Richard Allen, just to reiterate, he is now suspect numero uno. He has been arrested for Abby and Libby's murders. He is 50 years old, and he has been a pharmacy tech at CVS for years. Don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like 10 years or something. So it's not exactly blue collar, but he's not exactly, white collar either. His wife is named Kathy, and according to a letter that Allen wrote to the court, she had to quit her job and move out of their home for safety concerns, which he doesn't go into the details, but I assume she's being harassed by neighbors. The common questions. How could you not know? Did you know? Did you protect him? That sort of thing. And
so she had safety concerns about her husband, Allen?
He doesn't say, but I assume there were threats against her.
Right. Okay.
Like with BTK, there's a lot of people that are like, how did his wife not know that he was a serial killer? So it's a lot of hostility towards the wife in a lot of cases like that.
Yeah. And I have seen his daughter, BTK's daughter, Carrie Rawson, speak several times. And she was like, after he was arrested, he was a completely different person. And I saw how that person that he then showed me could have done these things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's insane to think about, but you really don't know.
It's easy to be in denial. It's easy to just not think about it, especially like we've been talking about when you have a trauma response, and people say, oh, serial killers, they're nice to their wives and stuff. No, that's not true. Most of them are.
Well, sometimes it is. I mean, think about GSK and his family. His daughters to this day defend him.
Right. But do you
think there was a lot. there were a lot of people that said, if that was not even my husband, if that was my boyfriend and I saw that video of him on the bridge, I would know right away 100% that was him. So why didn't she come forward? There's just a lot of that kind of accusation.
I would not know. I mean, I still can't know if it's my husband's voice when he picks up his work phone. I'm like, is it Dave or is this a coworker? So I couldn't find a ton about Alan's family. The only reference I could find to children is from a quote unquote newspaper called Techno Trends with a Z. So obviously it's reliable information. And all it said is he had a daughter. So Alan had lived most of his life in Mexico, Indiana, and Peru, Indiana, before moving to Delphi, Indiana. And I would like to know what is wrong with Indiana. Mexico, Peru, Delphi. I mean, they're getting a little uppity, or is that just me?
It's not original with names.
Again, the big question. Why is Alan just being arrested now, 5 years after the murder? So when the murders first happened, I believe the day after when the bodies were found, when Abby and Libby were found, Alan contacts the police and tells them, hi, I was at the Monon High Bridge that day at that time. So a beat cop goes out to interview him and he catches him outside of a grocery store. And then Alan is never contacted again until October of 2022.
How did he find him at the grocery store?
I assume Alan was like, hi, come talk to me.
At
So
the grocery store. Okay.
in this initial interview outside the grocery store, Alan tells the cop, I'm at the Monon High Bridge at this day, at this time, but I, quote, did not see Abby or Libby. He says in this interview that he was watching stocks on his phone, and after his arrest, he tells the police that he was watching fish. So do you guys think he's changing his story and lying? Or do you think he did maybe both of those things, and 5 years after the fact, he forgot he was watching stocks?
I mean, that's just hard
Lying
to
was
say.
lying was kind of the first thing that popped in my head, because that's, I don't know.
Well, one of the things I thought about, I mean, Kurt, you're a guy. I feel like every man I know is obsessed with watching stocks and the crypto every 2 seconds on their phone. I mean, it's a habit you have.
24/7 watching stocks.
So is mine.
I'm not.
It's because you're out geocaching.
Yeah, I'm too busy out geocaching to be watching stocks and watching fish. Like the watching fish thing is just such a weird.
Yeah.
It reminds me like our episode about Trini Gibson, a girl that disappeared in the Smoky Mountains, that the boy that is believed to have killed her said he was trailing a bear or off following a bear, hunting a bear. And it's just one of those stories that just,
yeah,
just one of those stories that doesn't make sense.
That doesn't add up. Watching fish is such a weird. It's like, are you like? It'd be different if he was like, I was out fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but that
it's a fishy story, just like Logan.
Yeah, very fishy.
But it's almost like the story is so dumb it's plausible, because if he wanted to give a good excuse, he could have said he was fishing instead of checking his stocks and watching fish.
Which is really weird to do in the middle of the forest anyway, though.
Yeah. and in February. I don't know.
Yes.
That's no sense.
So there were 3 witnesses, and these were juveniles, who saw a man that they said looked just like Alan on the Freedom Bridge Trail. People familiar with the case know is right next to Monon High. And they said that this man that looked like Alan was wearing the same clothes as the perp on the video. They also said, as they walked by, they said hello to him, but he acted creepy and glared at them instead of responding. And as someone from Boston, I know I would glare at anyone that spoke to me and I didn't know. But Jones and Sully say, from the South, you always say hello.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin too, you'd probably end up getting like their Facebook name and becoming friends with the person, because that's
how I am.
If you smile at me, I'm ready to be attacked. Like, I don't want anyone looking at me, acknowledging me. Like, we are strangers. Let's keep it that way.
Yeah, and my husband does not. Like, he doesn't say hi. It must be it's a very, like, New York East Coast thing. And it's not that you guys aren't friendly.
I've walked a lot on the trails around here, and I don't think I have ever not said hi to somebody and they didn't say hi to me back. It would be if somebody just glared at me and didn't say anything, that would stick with me because that would be way, way out of the norm here.
So maybe in Indiana, he seemed creepy because he didn't say hi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that would stick with somebody more than him being friendly.
Yes. On the other hand, these witnesses came forward after the murders. So who knows? Maybe they were reframing his behavior as creepy in their head because they think he might be a suspect.
Yeah. And eyewitness stuff is so sketchy.
Yes. There was another witness driving by who says that they saw a man that looked like Alan walking away from the Monon High Bridge, quote, bloody and muddy, like he had just been in a fight. If you're driving by someone wearing a dark blue or black jacket, I would not be able to tell that there was blood on them, would you?
No.
I'm like,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm like, I have worked in the funeral home business. I've seen blood on clothing. If you're wearing black or brown or a dark color, and blood dries like a deep brown color.
So Alan also tells investigators that he is wearing blue jeans and a blue or black Carhartt jacket that day. And the perp on the video is wearing blue jeans and a dark blue or black jacket.
Yeah.
But again, it's a very common outfit.
Yeah,
I mean,
generic.
especially for men, your fashion is pretty predictable, especially in the winter. You know, you only have so many jackets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he also tells police that he owns firearms. Police ask his wife, Kathy, and she confirms that he still owns that jacket and that he has guns and knives in their home. We have a generic-looking white guy wearing generic-looking clothing with a generic voice on the video. So, I mean, to me, if I was a jury member, this witness testimony alone would not be enough to convince me.
Not at all.
There was quite a few witnesses that describe a vehicle seen near the scene of the crime that matched Alan's vehicle at that time. But that witness testimony is all conflicting. I mean, they can't agree on the make or model of the vehicle, the color, it varies widely. So some of it matches his, some of it doesn't. But still, with all of this witness testimony, why was he never contacted after this initial interview outside the grocery store? Police say that they were going over old leads, and after reading this interview with Alan, they began investigating him, and that is how they caught him. The Murder Sheet podcast, which is led by an attorney, and they are infamous for always having seemingly inside information on these cases, they claimed that Alan was overlooked because a clerical error in the FBI database of leads. The FBI has done a review and claimed that the lead was filed correctly, and it must have been overlooked because of the sheer amount of information. So who do we believe here?
I think so many people are conditioned by shows like CSI and all that stuff to think that, you know, it's really easy to figure out who the perp is, you know, and all that stuff. And sometimes it's just not. And sometimes stuff does slip through the cracks. But this is just like so many red flags.
Yeah. Clerical errors do happen. We're only human. I don't think that there's anything nefarious, you know, but could it have slipped through the cracks? Yeah, absolutely. Is the FBI ever going to say that? No.
Yeah, government agencies never admit to shit.
No.
And of course, like on Reddit and stuff like that, there's people saying that somebody was protecting him and that, you know, like some other people were in the pedophile ring, that, you know, like the typical.
But I think that happens.
Oh, I do think it happens too. You know, but there were a lot of people that saying, what if Alan was innocent? What if he wasn't? What if he was that? You know, people are even saying, what if that is him in the bridge guy video, but he's not the one that did that to the girls and that he's innocent? But then the other evidence leads me to, you know, I'm sure we're going to get to the other evidence that implicates him.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Johnson?
According to Alan's attorney, Alan did not dispose of any guns or clothing after the murders. A bullet cycled through his gun was found between the girls' bodies. So Alan owns a .40 caliber Sig Sawyer model P226 pistol, and he bought this in 2001, and it was seized during the search of his home, and it did match that bullet found between Abby and Libby's bodies. Alan says to police he's never lent that gun to anyone, and he has no idea how it got to that crime scene or how that bullet was there, because he's never been to that crime scene. He admits to being on the Mona High Bridge that day, but again, not in the area specifically where the girls were found. The famous video is about 45 seconds long, but police have only released about, 5 seconds of that video. In the unreleased footage, police say that the girls mentioned a gun. So no cause of death has been released officially, but I think in the affidavit for Alan's arrest, if they had been killed by that same caliber weapon, it would have been in the affidavit. But on the other hand, maybe the cause of death was so gruesome that the police wanted to keep that out of the public arena.
Especially because they're minors.
Yes.
Everything that I kind of saw led towards edged weapons like knives. I didn't, but I don't know if that's accurate or not, but.
No, we've seen that info as well.
Yeah.
Yes. So the bullet was cycled through his gun. It was not fired. I mean, I think my theory is he uses the gun to control the girls, and he either misfires or rocks the gun and realizes it's going to be too loud. So he either stabs or bludgeons them.
From some stuff I read, it said that if there was already a bullet in the chamber and I'm not good with guns, so I don't know any of this stuff, but if you cocked it or do whatever you do, that it would have kicked that original bullet out of the chamber and put a new one in. And that, maybe he forgot he had one in there, was trying to intimidate them by cocking the gun, and that happened.
One of the reasons that the bullets might have been racked. So racking is basically the opposite of loading. So when you load a bullet, when you load a gun, it's going to put the bullet in the chamber. If you rack it, you're kind of pulling it back to see if there is a bullet in the chamber. And when you do that, it's going to shuck it out of the side, and that's going to leave a striation mark. Not as clear or as many striation marks as it leaving the barrel of the gun, but it's still going to leave a couple of marks. And you can actually go on to, particularly I know it's on the Instagram page, me doing this and what a bullet that's been racked looks like versus what a bullet that's been fired looks like. One reason he might have racked it would be because he was checking to see if there was a bullet in the chamber. Another reason, his gun could have jammed. And my leading theory on this is that he was using a nice gun with cheap ammo. So that cheap ammo was either jamming that gun, or the ammo is not good enough so that when he cocks the gun back, it's not pulling the bullet with it.
Remind me to never make Sully angry.
Yeah, exactly.
And so basically, to me, this means that he's a novice. He's not well trained. He's using cheap ammo. And does this then lead him to a different method, like stabbing or using a knife? And he may be a hunter that's not used to using a pistol or this type of weapon. So yeah, that's mine. And if he's trying to control the girls with a gun, I just want everybody to know that if somebody is fumbling around with a gun, or they're telling you, if you don't do such and such or I'm going to kill you, run. Because it is much harder than you would think to hit a moving target.
Because they said once the person controls the location and the situation, you have like a 1% chance of surviving that. So do anything you can to not give them that kind of control.
And it's going to throw the perp off. It's going to throw their plan off.
Yeah.
They're going to have to start aiming. They're going to have to make sure there's a bullet in the gun.
Yep.
And when I was out with my dad, I was having my dad kind of put stress on me, like, spitting out commands at me and doing different things. And I'm sitting there trying to load the gun and get as many shots off as I can. And it is difficult. And so, again, I wonder, not only is this person a gun novice, but does this mean that there could be a second person that's helping control this location? Like Kurt said, once you control the location, you're controlling the crime.
Yeah, and is he going to shoot the gun on the bridge when there's people
and that's
draw
another
that attention
thing,
to him?
Is if he's got a .40 caliber, if he shoots that gun off and he doesn't have ear protection on, he's going to blow his freaking eardrums out. I mean, that's going to be loud, very loud.
And assuming that he's able to hear the officer interviewing him outside the grocery store like the next day,
Yeah.
his ears were not blown out.
Or he had on ear protection, but that would just look so weird.
I know. And also, that would mean obviously it would indicate premeditation as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, another theory about the bullet is this bullet is and the 40 cal is a common weapon carried by law enforcement officers. So obviously there's a bunch processing the scene, and there's a possibility that police did not thoroughly investigate this bullet 5 years ago because they assumed it's police ammunition that has been left behind by accident.
Police are supposed to account for every bullet that they expel. You shouldn't there's no way really under any circumstances where bullets are just going to be falling out of your gun unless you're doing this racking motion. So. Yeah.
I didn't get a look. I saw what I believe people said was the crime scene, but a lot of people said that when the bullet went flying out, that there was ground cover, that he would not have been able to find that bullet. So I mean, I don't know. I do think that the gun was only used to control them.
Me too.
And when he cocked it, I think that it was to get them to lie on the ground, and that's when the knife came into play. That's my guess.
The officer in charge of this investigation is named Liggett, and he has been in charge since the beginning. And he's the same officer that wrote the probable cause for Alan's arrest. He writes this 2 weeks before he's up for re-election. So another question, why did it take so long for them to find Alan? Maybe he only reopened the case because he's up for re-election and wants the public on his side. Do we care if he only reopened it for his own benefit? I mean, I feel like either way, it was a good outcome.
Yeah,
I can't see somebody doing that. I think I have enough faith in people that I can't see somebody using that as a tool. I don't know.
Well, and that makes a good point, because do you really want to elect somebody where that's where their values or morals lie?
No.
Yeah. I mean, he also said, obviously he denied this, and he said he just wanted to make sure he had a clean record if he was leaving. He wanted to close out this case and have closure for himself and the family.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, like you said, he opened it for one reason, and now it has led us to probably the arrest of the killer. So
there is more election issues and conspiracies surrounding this case, though. The chief deputy of the Delphi department is demoted and replaced with Liggett, this investigator. And this is according to the former chief deputy that was demoted. He said he wanted to bring in outsider expertise early on in the days of the case and was disregarded. And he says he was demoted because big police didn't want him talking about it, how they messed up. This same chief deputy that was demoted lost another election to Liggett and was subsequently made the county dog catcher. So his motives for coming out with this information might be suspect.
I hate how politics plays into murder investigations. It's really just not fair. I mean, it's not just.
And we do know that the FBI was brought in, so I question his interpretation of events.
It's got to be so frustrating to be a family member and to see this kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, I feel like the family really doesn't know who to trust with all of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, how do you have a just, moral police department that this family is relying on to catch the killer of these two young girls? It's just not fair. And that's what sucks about a lot of these cases is really at the end of the day, it's just not fair. It's not fair what happens to the victims. The ripple effects go so far out. Then you get politics involved and re-elections, and it's like, really, in our McDuff case, we talked about how they were bribing the judges or the people that were sitting on the parole panel, and we broke it down to they were releasing known serial killers and putting a price on women's lives that I kind of broke the math down, and it's like $2,500 per life.
Right. And we don't have any proof that Delphi Police Department did anything wrong. From appearances, it seems like they did a good job.
The press conference, I don't know who exactly is speaking, but it's on the podcast Down the Hill. Whenever he says, "We don't know who you are and you could possibly be sitting in this room," that quote, it sends chills down my spine.
There was a lot of conjecture about that press conference.
Yeah.
I remember where they said it was almost like they were specifically looking at someone, like they knew who they were addressing when they said that during
Yeah.
the press conference.
Yeah, because he
Maybe they
looks
thought they
directly
did.
at someone.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. We're pretty much at the end. Richard Allen is set to go to trial the week of March 20th, which for listeners, that's my birthday. So send me some stuff.
Hey, happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm getting old and I'm not happy about it. The original judge for this case has recused himself, and we don't know why. So the current judge is Francis Gull. There was a gag order placed on December 2nd, and on January 13th, there was a hearing to extend it. Richard Allen has asked for financial assistance for his defense, such as hiring forensic consultants. And
asking like through a GoFundMe or what?
He asked the judge to give him money.
Wow. Okay.
And in my opinion, like, bro, sell your house.
Yeah.
Don't put it on the state. Assuming he's guilty, you're asking basically taxpayers to fund your defense. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And he has pleaded not guilty, obviously.
Mm.
So his defense team is Andrew Baldwin and Anthony Rizzi. One of Allen's defense lawyers has gotten off and accused triple murderer on a technicality. So it's a big time team. They're not novices. So that's where the case stands today. And I once again would like to thank Kurt for being with us through all this chatter. Would you like to promote your show or anything else you're working on right now?
It's the Strange Sessions. We actually are on YouTube. It's not video, it's audio. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on everything you could think of. We're probably on MySpace. I don't know. We're everywhere. So just look up the Strange Sessions, and that is where Krista and I have our podcast. I'm really interested to see where this goes.
To our fans, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. We will definitely keep you posted on any upcoming news or when Allen starts his trial process. But if you go to Spotify and Apple specifically, and rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, I will send you something spooky out of my collection in my studio. It could be a book, it could be a little painting, something of sorts, but I do have a lot of pretty cool stuff in my collection. So yeah, go for it. Go rate, review, subscribe, send us an email through our Gmail, kitchen.table.research@gmail.com, and let us know, and something will show up in your mailbox. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, such a special thanks to Kurt. It's honestly, I've been looking forward to this episode for weeks now, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us.
I truly loved it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Our sources for this episode were the Washington Examiner, The Sun, Murder Sheet Podcast, and many, many other newspapers and podcasts. And of course, I'd like to give a special thanks to the family of Abby and Libby, who have been at the forefront of this case and the media and all the information they have given us. So thank you, and I hope you guys find some closure soon.